lawsuits across the country. They're not going to survive this. There's no way. They better figure out how to, if they keep going to court and losing like that, they'd be better off to, pay small amounts and just, but I don't even know if they can do that. I don't know how much money. It's Bayer. It's a German company. It's no longer Monsanto. Monsanto doesn't exist. It's Bayer that owns Monsanto. Bayer aspirin. They acquired Monsanto last year. They issued a statement, said they're going to appeal the verdict. Well, of course you are. You just don't know, I should do a show on cleaning products in the house. It's a chemistry lab that needs to have all those warning signs up on it, and people are it's my home, and there's nothing wrong here. These are just cleaning products. No. People wonder how they get sick. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. And I was looking for that story on the beef, Gary.
Okay.
I had it, and then I lost my notes. Here it is. Okay, got it. Yet another recall. If you remember this I talked about avocados being recalled in 6 states this week because of listeria, and there's no hysteria here, and there's no mysteria either. It's just listeria. And Tyson recalled close to 70,000 pounds of frozen chicken strips over metal contamination. And I said, if this keeps up, if they do a recall on beef and tomatoes, you won't be able to make tacos and burritos. Well, 4,834 pounds of beef products are being recalled after a possible E. coli contamination, according to USDA Food and Safety Inspection Service. The beef heel and chuck tender products from Aurora Packing, Inc. in northern Aurora, Illinois. The products were made and packed on February 27th. This is what month? March.
March. Can it be April?
Okay. And shipped for institutional use in Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Again, affected products are Aurora Angus beef, boneless beef, chuck tender. And then the boneless beef, what's heel meat? Heel. I don't know what that means. Boneless beef, heel meat. What is that, Gary?
I'm looking that up.
Have you ever heard that expression?
No.
That's one of the things that happens when you do this show. You learn, can't know everything. These products were sold in bulk pieces and shipped in cardboard box case packages of various weights, they said. Okay. Find out what heel meat is?
Yeah, it's a cut of round.
Cut of round. Round what? Around what?
The beef heel of round represents a cut from the beef round immediately above the hock. So the back hock.
Okay.
So it's like the calf.
Okay, the heel. All right, I get it. We'll be back.
Ladies and gentlemen, listen up. It's me, your immune system. I'm
American dog tick, the black-legged tick, the brown dog tick, Gulf Coast tick, Lone Star tick, Rocky Mountain wood tick, the western back-legged tick. These are ugly critters, too. You see those photographs
Yes.
I sent you? I bring this up, I mentioned the ticks, because the CDC, for the first time, will be monitoring the nation's tick population and the diseases these pests carry. They're vectors, is what they are, and cause. More people, the number of people diagnosed with serious diseases caused by ticks, fleas, mosquitoes, and the like has more than doubled over the past few decades. One wonders why. Ticks cause the majority of these kinds of diseases, vector-borne diseases. Quote, for the first time this year, the CDC is funding states to conduct widespread surveillance of ticks and the pathogens they can transmit, in addition to funding human disease surveillance and education and prevention. This is according to Anna Peria of the National Center for Emerging Zoonotic Infectious Diseases, Division of Vector-Borne Diseases. My God, what a title for a job. Taken together, Ms. Pereira said, the data can help define areas where ticks are spreading the infectious pathogens that they carry and where the risk of tick-borne disease is increasing, close quote. There are more than a few people listening and watching this show that have are dealing with the consequences of being infected by one of these, by a tick or a mosquito or one of these critters. My goodness. I'm looking here. They're trying to identify, locate, Pacific Coast, parts of Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. That's where you find the western black-legged tick. The Rocky Mountain states, the Pacific Northwest, Nevada, and northern borders of Arizona and New Mexico is where you find Rocky Mountain wood tick, of course. The Lone Star tick, Atlantic Coast, Southeast, Northeast, Midwest, East Texas. Oh, that one's everywhere. Coastal areas from Texas to Maryland is where you find the Gulf Coast tick, obviously. The brown dog tick makes its way all over the country. Black-legged tick, northeast, southeast, around the Great Lakes. I mean, when you start to look at this, the American dog tick, east of the Rocky Mountains, California, and Oregon coasts, they're everywhere. The most common illness, and I know that there's people listening and watching this show that suffer from Lyme's disease. That's the most common illness caused by a tick bite. In 2017, there were nearly 43,000 cases of Lyme disease. That was up 17 points from 2016. Lyme disease represented 72% of all tick-borne diseases reported in 2017. They carry other diseases as well, these ticks. Rocky Mountain spotted fever. One thing after another. Anaplasmosis. Ehrlichiosis. I don't know how to pronounce these things. Tularemia. And Poisson virus. But these diseases are rarer, they said, than Lyme's disease. Or Lyme disease. Lyme is carried by a black-legged tick. It's called a deer tick for a good reason, and traditionally found in the northeast, mid-Atlantic, north-central U.S., and parts of Northern California. The other, about 2-3 weeks ago, I got up, it was a Saturday morning, and there were a herd of deer in my backyard. I mean, a herd. There were like 6 or 7 of them. They're beautiful. I won't go near them. Stay away from them. Of course, they're going to run away, but no way am I getting close. I don't have any pets, so. In 1996, we used to say no Lyme disease south of Potomac River. but it's moved south. It has spread to the west of the Pennsylvania border and to Michigan and surrounding states. Serious problem. So I'm just bringing it to your attention. Be aware that summer is coming. The incidence of mosquito bites, tick bites, flea bites rise during the summer. Your pets are a wonderful environment for ticks. The fur, nice and, they love it. And they feed off the blood of your pet. Mm-hmm. Then they get around to biting you. Then you get infected. Come back. We're going to look for Michael Lyon. We'll see where he is. And you are listening to LTN Coast to Coast and globally. 40%, round numbers. What the exact metric is 39.8%. 40% of adults 20 years of age and older are obese. 71.6, let's call it 72%, in the United States, adults 20 years of age and older are overweight, including obesity. I used to say 68%. Now it's 72. Forecasting models have it by 2050, they have it up to 80%. You know what? We may get there before 2050. This keeps up. Welcome back to Let's Talk Nutrition. Dr. Michael Lyon's the guest today. This is in the U.S. I don't know what the numbers are. I didn't look. I can. Canada, it probably pretty comparable. Probably maybe right, maybe exactly the same. I don't know. It can't be that much different. We're not separated from that neighbor by, very much. I mean, very connected to Canada. Beautiful. I dig Canada a lot. I like Canada. And so, yeah, it is, to say that it's, I just finished a paper entitled Obesity Among the Most Pernicious and Pervasive Public Health Problems of the 21st Century. To some, that may sound like a hyperbolic title. Among the most pernicious and pervasive public health problems of the 21st century. I can make and I did, make a pretty good cogent argument, I think, as to why it is. It is undermining the health of the nation. It is crippling the medical care system, insurance. I mean, I don't know this is not sustainable. It's not. So, this decades-long obesity epidemic is among the most pernicious public health problems in the U.S. and worldwide in the 21st century. Obesity is ubiquitous in that 40% of adults and nearly 19% of children and adolescents within the United States are obese. 650 million adults globally suffer from obesity, and more than 340 million children and adolescents 5 to 19 years of age are overweight or obese, according to the WHO, World Health Organization. With that, I introduce probably one of the best experts on obesity, on weight loss, how to run a clinic, how to help people. He sees his clinic in Canada is, for many of these people, the last stop. And they can only get into that clinic by referral, and they're seeing 200 and 300 patients a day. It's remarkable. Dr. Lyon, it's always great to have you on. I was talking about you earlier. You didn't know. I was setting you up for today's show. We're glad to have you here today.
Oh, it's always really fun to be on your show. I really enjoy the discussions we have.
Do you get a little frustrated knowing, I mentioned to the audience, I said, Dr. Lyon probably knows more about the weight loss, obesity, and the epidemic, and he's forgotten more than many know. Do you ever get frustrated? It's now called a disease. The American Medical Association in 2013 declared that it's a disease. One, do you see it as a disease, and do you get frustrated knowing what you know about this disease?
Well, I guess probably the biggest frustration that I have is that we hear the numbers that such high numbers of our population are struggling with their weight, and obesity is the great killer of society, and these are all true things. But then the finger gets pointed right back at the people who are struggling with their weight. And what I really want to make sure people understand is that the reason why we have an epidemic of obesity is because of the environment that we live in. And it's something that is essentially, no matter how much we believe that we are making all these choices, which of course we are being influenced by deeper forces, both from from the marketplace and from our own physiology, to the point where the sense that we are really the one making all the decisions about our weight is kind of a delusion, actually.
I made that argument. I made that same argument in my paper. I said that we live in an obesogenic world, and I fleshed that out a little bit, but that's the point you're making. And by design, we seem to have this sort of obesogenic tendency, don't we?
Well, in fact, everyone except a very small minority has a tendency towards weight gain, and an excessive weight gain, some more than others. But the thing that appears to be the strongest genetic determinant, that is actually not rare, but it's a small number of people, is the genetic preponderance for slimness in an obesogenic society. So those people who are, who are slim and feel like they're kind of smug and they have it all together, they've actually been gifted with genes that allow them to be that way in an obesogenic society. The rest of us are the ones that have to fight tooth and nail to avoid significant weight gain in the world that we live in.
Shaming and blaming the victim, that is so easy to do. I heard this one doctor. I refuse to give his name. I'm not going to do that. But he said obesity is a problem of lack of will. These people just don't have any willpower. And I thought, my God, that is probably one of the most ignorant, insensitive things to say. If it was just about willpower, we could have solved this a long time ago.
Exactly. It's so much more than that. And the reality is that when you look at, for instance, the areas of the world, there are some, there's about 5 regions of the world that have been studied extensively because they're small areas within certain countries that have extraordinary freedom from most chronic disease, and the population tends to live much older. And not only do they live older with large numbers of people over 100, but they're vitally alive, alert, and functional well into their 90s as the majority of the population. And they've been studying these so-called blue zones, places like Okinawa, Japan, and Sardinia, the island off Italy, and Icarus, another island of Greece, and also even an area in Los Angeles, Loma Linda. And then a small area within Costa Rica. So these are the areas they call the blue zones. And they've been trying to figure, okay, what is it? What are they eating? How do they live? What makes them free from cardiovascular disease and cancer? And why is it that they can be still driving their cars when they're 98 and completely alert with no memory loss? And then one day, without ever going to the doctor, they say, I'm just not feeling well. I think I'm going to go have a nap.
Mm-hmm. We come back, and by the way, Loma Linda, I'll tell you an interesting factoid about Loma Linda and why it's a blue zone.
Feel tired, lethargic, or irritable? Take Solid.
So Lyon is my guest today. The only problem with Dr. Lyon, he's not on enough. He's busy. He alluded, not even did more than allude. He referenced the blue zones. Let me just give you a little background. Dan Buettner, the blue zones are regions of the world where Dan Buettner claimed and has the data to support it. People live longer. You heard Dr. Lyon mention that. That term, that phrase, blue zones, first appeared in November 2005 in a National Geographic magazine cover story that he authored. It was entitled "The Secrets of a Long Life." I have the book. You can get the book. And he identified 5 regions, as Dr. Lyon accurately identified, called blue zones. Blue zones. And he trademarked the term, by the way. And it includes Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Ikaria, Greece, and then there's Loma Linda, California. What? I don't know. How did that get in there? Well, it got in there because the Seventh-day Adventists lived there. You say, what do they have to do with anything? Well, it turns out this is where the intersection of religion and nutrition come into play. They advocate for a plant-based way of eating and, of course, a lifestyle that is relatively healthy. And he lays this out in the book. Now, understand this, and to give them credit. This whole concept grew out of the demographic work that Gianna Pez and Michael Poulin did in a published an article in the Journal of Experimental Gerontology. And they identified Sardinia's Neuro province as the region where the highest concentration of male centenarians lived. As these guys worked on that project, on their map, they drew concentric circles on the map to locate areas inside the circle as a blue zone. And it was blue. The ink was blue. That's how the name blue zones came into existence. They were just drawing blue concentric circles around those places. Nothing mysterious about it. No mysterioso here. Dr. Lyon, welcome back. I just wanted to fill that in a little bit. So the Seventh-day Adventists are onto something in Loma Linda, aren't they?
Yeah, they certainly are. And, in essence, what the most important thing to take away, I think, first of all, from the Blue Zones project, where they're trying to tease out the different things that are in common of these different societies that have such longevity and relative freedom from age-related disease, is that these are individuals, when they live there, are not going about these different behaviors with any kind of purposeful effort.
Intention, right?
Yeah, without intention, in the sense that they're not sort of people that go to the gym and they work out all the time, or they specifically have special diets they follow and
right.
Such.
Yeah.
They just simply are fortunate to live in a society where there's a number of important things that come together that create this state of health. Mm-hmm. And of course, the diet has been a huge focus, and it is definitely a big part of it. It's an important part of it. And one thing that I would really want to say right off the bat is, with the enormous and very, very aggressive marketing and pushing of the low carbohydrate, high fat ketogenic diet, or so-called keto, as though it's somehow this answer to, first of all, weight problems, but it's almost presented as an answer to all of life's problems in that simple, but very restrictive diet. I would say we have absolutely no evidence that the low carbohydrate, high fat ketogenic diet is going to promote in any way, in the long term, good health. And in fact, I think that we have very serious reasons to believe that, and we have some of the data now emerging to say that if you follow a low carbohydrate, high fat ketogenic diet long term, you will probably shorten your lifespan more than you would if you had a very serious smoking habit.
Oh my!
I think that
Let me stop. Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
and I just what you just did now. I predicted you would do at the top of the show. I said Dr. Lyon says things in a very calm, passionless way, but what he says is stunning. Repeat what you just said.
Well, I'm not saying this lightly, but I'm going to become more vocal about it because I'm very concerned, especially the number of doctors, very influential doctors, who are getting on this bandwagon with nothing more than their own personal anecdotes and a lot of anecdotes from their own practice based on what happens over the course of a few months and sometimes up to a couple of years when people end up losing weight, and they have this idea that somehow it eliminates any need to be concerned about calories and portion control. All you do is you eliminate all the carbs, you eat all the fat you want, and of any sort, and you lose weight automatically. I'd say, first of all, when you actually put this to scientific scrutiny, it doesn't work out the way that they say. When you compare the low-carbohydrate diets, even done very correctly by the people who are promoting this so heavily, when you compare these diets to other diets that are reasonable diets, like, for instance, a healthy low-fat diet where you're eating mostly plant-based foods and you're eating lower amounts of fat, and the carbohydrates you do eat are really good carbohydrates, not the the crummy carbohydrates that they're so available, the crackers and chips and snack foods and white flour products and so on, but you're eating really truly whole grain products and starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes and squash and so on. When you have those two diets go head to head, there's no difference even in the short term in their beneficial effects on blood sugar, on weight, on cholesterol or cardiovascular risk factors. The only difference is that the high-fat diet still does result typically in a rise in the worrisome LDL cholesterol. But in the short term, we really don't see any great advantage over this low-carb diet. We really don't. There's very little evidence. There's been studies looking at the claim, does it really cause your metabolism to go way, way up when you go on a low-carb ketogenic diet? Well, probably a little bit. But likewise, when you eat a diet which is mostly plants and lots of very coarse grains, where you're not eating finely ground flour, even whole wheat flour, but as much. But, say instead of whole wheat flour, you're thinking of something like the...
Hold your thought. We'll come back. We'll continue. This is great. This is good stuff. Talk Nutrition. Great to be with you. Thanks for tuning in today.
Don't forget, you can get us at 877-897-8255. That's 877-897-TALK. Follow us, like us on our Facebook at Let's Talk Nutrition, and follow that YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. You get an announcement every time we go live at Let's Talk Nutrition on YouTube.
What do these countries have in common? American Samoa, Nauru, Cook Island, Tokelau, Tonga, Samoa, Palau, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, and Kuwait. What do they have in common? What do you think? Place to get a suntan? Hot vacation spots?
I know some very large people come from the Samoan Islands.
Those are the first 10 of the top 20 most obese places in the world. Then you got St. Kitts and Nevis, then Micronesia, the Bahamas, Belize, Qatar, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. Those are the top 20 obese places in the world. The least obese countries in the world, it'll make sense, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Eritrea, Madagascar. Madagascar. I know some people from Madagascar. Democratic Republic of the Congo, India, Cambodia, Afghanistan. Those are the top 10 least obese countries in the world. That top 20, they're not a blue zone within a continent or two of those places. It's remarkable. We were talking in the first hour, well, we still are too, with Dr. Michael Lyon, and he identified this seminal. It's a seminal work, I guess. Dan Buettner's book, The Blue Zones, and then Michael Pullen and his colleague, that other demographer, Pez. They started the whole thing, and they were drawing concentric circles on the map with blue pen, trying to identifying those places that were where people lived that were healthy. That's where the blue zones came from. Nothing mysterious about that. It was just they were taking notes. Those obese places in the world, those obese countries, are countries that tend to be obesogenic places. Dr. Lyon made the poignant point that obesity, its context is everything. You can be situated in a context that's obesogenic. In other words, you can live at a place or in a country or a city or an environment where, however you want to describe it, where the built environment doesn't lend itself to healthy living. No sidewalks, no running trails, no whatever, bad food, no grocery stores. There are food deserts all over the place in this country. You find gun shops, pawn shops, liquor stores, porn shops, but you won't find a grocery store. Okay? That's an obesogenic, and you find fast food restaurants all over the place. That would be like an obesogenic environment. It lends itself to people they're going to eat that lousy, cheap food. It's cheap, jacked with calories, heavy, energy dense, nutritionally vacuous. So you get my point. And Dr. Lyon's on the money. If it were just about willpower, it was just about quit shaming and blaming that person. Say, well, that person's fat because they ate their way into fathood. Well, yes, they did. But they didn't do it alone. You're going to be hard-pressed to find somebody who's obese and suffering with obesity that says, oh, I'm really enjoying this. This is a lot of fun. You may have people that accept it, but you're gonna have to go a long way to convince me and show me some very compelling data to say that these people are just truly enjoying this. 40%. 40% of our population in this country is obese, man. Come on. 72% is overweight or obese. We're headed toward 80%. It won't be long. There's something amiss. It's not genetics. It's not a genetic driver, man, that's doing this. It's diet and lifestyle. And you could be born into a set of circumstances where you're just going to end up being, gaining weight and being fat.
I have a friend who's an attorney. His name's Dan, and he does elder law.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually just posted a thing probably about 5 minutes ago about a veteran who ended up dying because of what he was eating. He had diabetes, wouldn't get it checked. Mm-hmm. And the house is just a mess. So
yeah,
it's sad.
There's so many people that are adrift and lost, don't know what to do. They're trying to figure it out, and they don't know what to do. So it's fine and dandy because you need to lose weight. You can do that all day long, but until and when you show them how, that is the least compelling way to persuade anybody to do anything, is telling them what they should do. What they need to do. You need to. It's not what. You need to tell them how. And telling them why. Oh, you're going to die of X, Y, and Z if you don't. That's not a very persuasive argument. Trust me. My area of my so-called area of expertise is social influence and persuasion, and I'm telling you that telling somebody why they shouldn't do something. Tell a chronic smoker why they what the consequences of smoking are, why they should quit. They'll light up as you're telling them. You got to tell them how. And that's what Dr. Lyon does in that clinic. It's a nuts and bolts, get down to it. How? How do you do this? And that's where you need to be. And that's why Dr. Michael Lyon being on the show is really a treat. And it's a people listening and watching the show, I would urge you to please pay attention to what he says. I have never found him to say something that was erroneous, not supported by, he makes a number of assertions and claims, but he's got the data. It's there. Get to Michael in a second. Let's go to Tampa, Florida. Bill, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Doctor. I've often wondered about the Samoan people, the island people out there, why they are so big. I was in the military with a guy, and he didn't seem to eat that much. I mean, there just seems to be some sort of a genetic component to that.
They do make that.
Hold weight more, or
they do make that. They do make that. Some experts make that assertion that there may be a genetic predisposition for those particular ethnic groups to gain weight. I'm not expert in that. Maybe Dr. Lyon knows more about that. Let me ask him. Dr. Lyon, do you know anything about those island people and why they have this propensity to be obese?
Yeah, there's been some intriguing research looking at people groups who do have a preponderance towards obesity. I know that the group that's probably been studied the most are the Pimas. These are Aboriginal First Nations people, Native people who live in the area around Phoenix, Arizona, and south. Originally, they were extending into Mexico before it was Mexico, and they had prior to the modern world encroaching upon their life. They were an agricultural people, probably the most advanced agricultural people in the world, in fact. For over 1,000 years, they had, in the desert, they had built hundreds of miles of irrigation canals extending from the Gila River, and they were involved with very detailed breeding of crops. In fact, something in the order of 50 to 60% of the vegetables available in the supermarket today are thanks to these people, and they also...
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome to.
You got caught up in studying.
Yeah, I was reading. Dr. Lyon got me intrigued. Dr. Lyon referenced. We had a caller, Bill, who asked the question: what is it about the Samoans and the island people, Pacific Island people, that have this propensity to gain weight? And some have speculated there's a genetic component. I asked Dr. Lyon what he knows about that, and I knew he would know. And then he referenced the Pima Indians of Arizona and Mexico. And then I went on PubMed, and I found a good article on high-risk populations, the Pimas of Arizona and Mexico. This is an intriguing story, and I appreciate Dr. Lyon bringing this bringing it to our attention. And looking here, I was trying to find something I could read to you about them, what happened to them. Dr. Lyon, welcome back. The Pima of Arizona adapted to this desert homeland. They directed water, they said, through an elaborate system of canals and this and that. And then around 1900, the increased population of white settlers to the north led to the eventual diversion of the water that supported the Pima's way of life. And then they ended up, one thing after another, the food curtailment of farming led to impacts on their food intake, and they became, there was famine. Their life changed from farming sustained through physical labor to one of food scarcity and little labor. As a result, this time period marked the end of a lifestyle to which the Pima were well adapted and transitioned to a lifestyle, the writers say, for which they were poorly adapted. Their low-fat, high carbohydrate diet changed to one that ultimately derived more than 40% of its energy from fat. At the same time, the demand for physical labor subsided. Then type 2 diabetes. But there's also a genetic component, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's some intriguing genetics. For instance, there was an experiment done with a group of Pimas compared in a controlled study to a group of typical Americans, and they had them essentially rigged up with motion sensors all over their body and had them sit and watch a movie, and they also recorded it so that they could look sort of in fast motion later at what it really looked like. And the typical American, when you sit and watch a movie, there would be like fidgeting and squirming and sort of getting up and down and moving and this and that, and just this sort of constant motion when you look at it in fast motion, whereas the Pimas would sit like a statue, just quietly and hardly move a muscle the whole time. And you think, well, perhaps if you go back into their distant past, the people who were reliant on the flow of one river for an abundance of agricultural products, some of which would not store very well, there might be years where the crop yield was very low and they had to rely on much less food, or they had to suddenly go out into the desert and find, lizards and desert rabbits and things to get a different source of food, and so they probably well adapted to being able to endure starvation by, when they gain weight, holding on to it very well.
Is that called the thrift? Is that part of that the thrifty gene hypothesis?
Yeah, and it's also when people from the Pima group are put on a low-calorie diet, what you see is a really significant adaptation to the reduction in calories by a reduction in metabolism. And when they are put on a higher calorie diet, they gain weight at a much more rapid pace than individuals who are not from that genetic ancestry. I think the thing that's most important to point out is when you hear lectures from individuals who are promoting the low carbohydrate, high fat ketogenic diet, they'll say, well, look at the people from the far north, the Inuit, which we've incorrectly called the Eskimo, but the Inuit and the Dene from the far north lived without any carbohydrates, and they were free of cardiovascular disease and so on. Well, first of all, they probably weren't, and also they didn't live long enough to have cardiovascular disease. They usually died in their 30s or 40s when there was no Western civilization. And secondly, just because they didn't have carbohydrates doesn't mean that that's the thing that imparted great health to them. It was the diet that was available, and that's what they ate. So I've often asked the question to these, keto gurus, what about the Pima people? These are native people who were free of diabetes before Western civilization, and the diet that protected them from diabetes and obesity, which was absolutely unknown in these people, is a diet that was deriving calories. More than 80% of the calories were from carbohydrates, from starchy vegetables and grains that they grew themselves. Now, of course, they were very healthy carbohydrates, and that's the thing that we really have to emphasize is carbohydrates are all not equal. The carbohydrates that we typically eat in North American society are things like sugar, sugary beverages, and sugar-added to foods, white flour products, other refined flour foods. Even fine-ground wheat flour behaves fairly similarly to, the whole wheat flour behaves very similarly in terms of blood sugar response to white flour. So when we're talking about whole grains, I really mean whole grains. I mean the grain itself maybe broken into a few pieces, but not finely ground up. And then when you have that kind of carbohydrate intake, starchy vegetables, and really, truly whole grains, the work of digestion is very significant. It takes a lot of work for your body to digest that food.
And I'm going to cut you off because we have to go. We'll come right back. There's something else that Dr. Lyon's alluding to. When you listen to those foods he's mentioning, it's the F word. What is in those foods that really is magical?
Don't be stressed out or anxious. Take Hempenol.
with us today, and we've been talking about this conversation is all by way of setting up to give you, remember what I said. You can tell people why they need to do something. Okay, that's fine. You need to tell them. You need to tell them, why they need to lose weight. Most of the time, they know why. You got to get around to how. If you don't get there, how is the most persuasive and most potent argument to make to anybody. And that's what Dr. Lyon does for a living in that clinic that they have in Canada, where hundreds of people come through that clinic every day, and they're trying to show them how. Sure, they talk about why. I'm not saying you dismiss that. What's really underneath, there's a subtext to all that we've been saying today. You heard Dr. Lyon mention whole food plant-based diet, or plant-based diet, whole grains, unprocessed foods. The F word is that I alluded to coming out of that last block was fiber. Now, when we talk about plant-based this and plants that and plant whatever, and I'm all in 100% full stop, people want to talk about all the exotic phytonutrients, those chemicals with fancy names and all the research and, and the latest trend in fashion. Let me just tell you something, at least from my point of view. It's all about the fiber. And I told Gary during the break, I said, fiber is like equivalent to the blue-collar worker. Not very fancy, straight, hard-working, shows up for work every day. Blue-collar workers. That's what fiber is. It's the blue-collar workers of nutrition. Maybe Dr. Lyon doesn't agree with that, but that's sort of how I see it. Dr. Lyon, welcome back.
Yes. Fiber is really central. If you look at what diet were these people eating in these different blue zones, or what are they eating, one of the common features in every case is that they have a great deal of dietary fiber, essentially because they're eating mostly locally grown food, and foods that are very similar to the way they were when they were first picked, including grains. Mm-hmm. Like for instance, in Sardinia and Italy, if they were going to be eating wheat, it was often in the form of wheat berries or farro. It's a lovely thing to make. Have you ever had farro?
No.
It's so delicious.
I never.
You cook it like rice. You just take the whole wheat berry. It's it's just an old-fashioned varietal of wheat. It's something that is still wheat, and they boil it, and then you can use it in a stew, in a soup. You can put it in salads. You can just add some flavor to it and make it the central part of the dish. It's absolutely spectacular. It'd be like how we use barley. Barley is another grain that's a fabulous thing to cook whole, and forms of brown rice that are from more they've been passed down from generation to generation. You can get some of these now that are these wonderful dark colored, often purple or rich red colored, with so many phytonutrients and so much fiber. And when you eat these kinds of whole grains, they're challenging for your body to digest. It takes a lot more work. So what we call the thermogenic effect of your meal is greater. You end up having a boost in your metabolism just because your body's working hard to digest your meal. And also, you only digest a fraction of the calories. So you might eat a meal with whole grains, really truly whole grains, where the grain calories are, say, 500 calories. You may only digest and absorb 300 calories of those grains. The rest ends up in the colon. It feeds the colon bacteria, and it creates a milieu for healthy gut flora. And so one of the biggest worries I have about people on the high-fat ketogenic diet is the relative absence of fiber from grains. We think, oh yeah, well, they're eating vegetables, there's fiber. There's not that much fiber in most vegetables. If you don't eat legumes like beans, peas, and lentils, and you don't eat whole grains, you're not getting the fiber that we know is what imparts really good health. There's been actually a big population study with over 1.5 million people where they've looked at what factors are promoting longevity in Western civilization in general, And what they've determined is that the people who eat the most fiber coming from whole grains and legumes have a 30% reduction in all-cause mortality. This was published fairly recently. It was, really a landmark study saying that it appears that fiber from seeds and nuts and grains and legumes is really the secret to longevity if you want to pick out one single dietary factor.
What's interesting, to speak that way in this modern period, if you will, is almost heretical. It's almost like a nutritional heretic. They're saying, "Wait a minute, you're promoting carbohydrates," and they want to stone you with whole grains.
That's right. You have insane books like Wheat Belly and Grain Brain, and you have people become essentially they develop anxiety disorders around their diet. That's essentially what we know from double-blind placebo-controlled trials on gluten sensitivity, except for those people that have celiac disease, and there are some other variations of gluten intolerance. But for most people that feel they're gluten intolerant and keep feeling terrible when they eat those foods, if you do a double-blind study where you put gluten in capsules, actual gluten, you put it in capsules and give them a handful of either gluten capsules or placebo capsules, absolutely no difference between gluten and placebo in people that are self-reported gluten intolerant. And
that's
so
amazing.
What we're doing is because of these crazy books that are out there and people that are pushing their agenda, usually with a lot of money behind it, usually some sort of company and some industry that's pushing something, what you have are these people that are developing essentially eating disorders because they're trying so hard to eat clean, which realistically, you go to these cultures where they're living till they're 100 years old without any disease, and they don't worry about their diet. They just eat what
they just live their life and eat what they were taught to eat, their relationship with food. And Dr. Lyon's clinic, I am sure, I wish I had, I'll even take a penny for every time PGX was mentioned. PGX is made by natural factors, and it's a soluble fiber. And you notice he didn't mention one product the whole time he's been on. He didn't. He's only, and that's what's great about him. But I need to mention PGX. It is a product that has the research behind it. I included it in the paper that I just finished. I mentioned PGX right at the very end, and that approach using PGX. And we come back, we'll get Dr. Lyon to spend that last block talking a little bit about PGX. It's sold in fine health stores throughout the United States, and it comes in granules. They have it in powdered form. You can make it in wonderful shakes and different flavors, and it works. It's nothing but fiber. Just soluble fiber. It's a polyglycoplex. Now, these are interesting fibers, but we'll come back. I'll have the L10 health question, too.
Want to get
fashion the LTN health question of the day. Keying off of the theme of blue zones, these places on the planet where people live a long life with quality of life. But the research shows that there are certain lifestyle choices and characteristics that define these places on the planet where people live a long time. This is an easy one. Which of the following items is not a characteristic of these blue zones? 1, family, putting family ahead of other concerns. 2, less smoking. 3, being carnivorous, being heavy meat eaters. 3, next, having constant moderate physical activity. And we'll leave it there. I could add more. Which one of those doesn't belong? A, putting family ahead of other concerns, smoking less, being meat eaters, constant moderate physical activity. Which one of those doesn't belong in these places where people live a long time? Here's the number to call to be a winner.
877-897-8255. That's 877-897-TALK.
Dr. Lyon, welcome back. Could you just do a little tutorial on PGX and why it works and such a good thing to do to lose weight and keep it off?
First of all, if we have anyone who really wants to read about the science behind dietary fiber and how it is used in weight management, like in our very busy government-funded center where we treat 350 people a day, you can read the study or the paper that I wrote with my main dietitian in my clinic. It's a paper that you can get by just Googling, and it's on PubMed. The title of it is there a place for dietary fiber supplements in weight management? Is there a place for dietary fiber supplements in weight management? And if you just use Google, you look down and you'll see my name, M.R. Lyon, click on it, and then download the PDF and read it. It's, I think, still one of the most succinct, and it's 2012, so it's not totally up to date, but it's still relatively up to date as far as giving you the real science behind dietary fiber and how it isn't just something that makes you feel fuller. It changes the very hormonal nature of the body and the gut flora, and it'll tell you how that fiber that is that is soluble and fermentable and highly viscous, that absorbs water, is really what we want to try to get more of in our diet, which is very challenging. That's why that I was involved in research looking to try to find a way to get to in a very easy way, get a lot of very, very highly water-soluble, water-absorbing, viscous fiber into people's diets. And it's quite challenging, but we ended up getting involved in a project that resulted in the development of PGX, which is the most water-soluble fiber ever discovered, in that about 5 grams, maybe a half a teaspoon, will absorb about 1 quart of water. So you can think, if you have a stomach and it's only got about 1.5 quarts to 2 quarts of volume, if you eat a meal and you add this fiber along with your meal, and it absorbs a whole quart of volume so that your stomach feels twice as full as it normally would, it's a lot easier to cut back on your food and feel completely satisfied. So PGX, we've been involved in probably 30 different studies with it, and I have to say, in all the years that I've worked with it, it has become a pillar in the work that we do, because having something completely natural that works as effectively as most of the prescription drugs for reducing appetite is really very, very helpful. Because in the long run, you don't really want to stay on a weight loss drug. Maybe in the short term, there might be a place for that, but the reality is that those are very expensive, sometimes over $500 a month for some of the prescription drugs for weight loss. And also, we don't really know their long-term safety. So if you can be on a dietary fiber supplement, PGX is beyond anything that we can really tell you to eat that gives you fiber. Sure, we continue to say eat whole grains, eat legumes, eat as much fiber food as you can, but then when you add PGX to every meal, the effects are really quite profound. It's something that can really help people cut way back on their food and feel completely comfortable, partly because the stomach is full, and partly because it smooths out the blood sugar so you don't have those relative hypoglycemic periods. And it also changes the gut flora to make it so you're making certain hormones that help you feel more satiety. So it's a really important thing for people to understand. And again, download the paper. You'll be able
I
to
have it.
read the science.
I had it before, but I got it in a matter of 1 minute. But
yeah.
it's a wonderful paper, and I've referenced it in my own writings. I thought about, when I was writing this paper, I was thinking about PGX, and I thought that one of the unintended good consequences of PGX is that it starts to shape behavior. In other words, what I'm getting at, it seems to me, and you probably know more about, I know you know more about it than I do, but I'm speculating, hypothesizing that it shapes behavior because you're teaching people how they get comfortable with eating less. And you're shaping their behavior and their relationship with food. I know it's sort of a forced compliance in that the PGX is making the stomach feel full and so on. I get that. But at the same time, I think it's shaping the behavior long term. Do you disagree with that?
Well, if people want to make the change, if they really want to eat more correctly and to eat less and to have less times when they succumb to temptation and eat the wrong foods, PGX can make a huge difference. It levels the blood sugar, so you're less likely to have that sweet tooth. It also makes you feel full when you're eating smaller portions, more appropriate for weight loss. And so when people are really serious, they say, I really need to get down to it. I need to clean up my diet. I need to eat less. I need to lose weight. If they start to take PGX with each meal, like a 5-gram dose is what we tell our patients, either in the form of a weight loss protein shake or meal replacement, or the granules themselves where they can just add it to their food, their soup, to say a tomato.
Easy to use. Go to pgx.com, learn more. The answer to today's question, y'all didn't get it today. Not that you didn't know. Just rarely do you not call and get the answer. Carnivorous didn't belong. Family, less smoking, being omnivorous. Majority of food consumed is derived from plants. They do eat meat, but most of it's plant and moderate physical activity. All characteristic of these places where people live a long life. Dr. Lyon, thank you. Your health is your wealth. I'll see you tomorrow.
Everyone's raving about the newest botanical superstar